name is Fred Burkey. I'm an extension agent for the University of Florida IFAS. And this is a special program that we're doing for MCTV in Martin County on hurricane preparedness. And I have a wonderful panel right here that are going to help in answers to all of the questions that you might have. On my right is Deborah McCaughey.
Oh,
I got it almost. You know, I almost got it right.
You were close. You did just fine.
All right. She has worked in the field of emergency management for 25 years and is the existing emergency management agency director for Martin County Fire Rescue.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. She was originally with the City of Stuart in Martin County for over 20 years, taking them through Hurricanes Francis, Jean in 2004, and Hurricane Wilma in 2005. She then accepted a position with Martin County Emergency Management as their senior planner in 2006, and then was appointed as the Emergency Management Director for Martin County in February 2012. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Next, we have Yvette Goodeel.
Goodeel, yes.
Oh, I did it. Oh, that was pretty close. Yeah. Yvette received a master's degree from the University of Kansas and graduated from the University of Miami with a bachelor's degree. Yvette began working with Martin County in December 2011 as the Martin County Sustainability and Commercial Horticultural Extension Agent and Master Gardener Coordinator, which is no small thing. Yvette provides educational programming to professional fertilizer and pesticide applicators and assists commercial growers, landscapers, and others in finding the answers to their horticultural questions. She also trains and coordinates the Master Gardeners.
Wow.
All right.
Thank
I got through that one all right. Wonderful to have you, Yvette. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Last but not least, we have Nick Blunt. Nick is the area manager for Treasure Coast for Florida Power and Light Company, the principal subsidiary of Next Era Energy Incorporated. Mr. Blunt joined FP&L in 1972 after receiving a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Tennessee. He also earned an MBA from Florida Institute of Technology. He has held numerous positions in engineering, power systems, and external affairs. In his present position, he is responsible for government affairs and community relations for Martin and Okeechobee counties. Thank you very much for being with us, Nick.
Good, thank you.
Thank you all, really. I think what we'll do is that we'll ask each one of you questions in the area of hurricane preparedness and also what you would do possibly after a hurricane. And I think we'll start with Debbie. And I know this is a long list, but let's see what you can do with it. And what pre-hurricane suggested supply list probably would you do? And would you do them right now? Because we're really just starting the hurricane season. But is this something that we would prepare right now?
Yes. We always recommend that folks go ahead and start their preparations this early. You don't want to wait until we're watching a storm or we have a storm that's threatening Martin County to run out and have to get your supplies and figure out what you need to do. For several reasons, if you go ahead and start now, you can pick up a little bit at a time of your supplies, your non-perishable foods. Stock up on plenty of water. You need a gallon per person per day for 5 to 7 days. You need the flashlights. You need the batteries. You need your pet supplies. You need that manual can opener. If you start going out now and getting those supplies, by the time we get a threat, you won't have to run out in that mad rush with the crowds and try to stock up and get your supplies.
Very good. And I know the list is much longer, but we can supply them an area where they can find this list
We
later.
will provide it, because it is a lengthy list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know, talking about that and you're preparing ahead of time, how do you keep track of the latest information that you can get? Let's say I'm an individual, I'm staying at home, and I'm looking for ways to find out how close the hurricane is. Where do you suggest that how you actually do that?
Well, to find out and get the forecasts, you can always listen to the local radio stations. You can always watch it on television. You can go on the National Hurricane Center website. If you have a computer, go on the website, get the latest information. And during an activation, or once we're activated and under that threat, you can turn to WQCS 88.9 FM or WSTU and get your local information, where you can find out exactly what Martin County's doing. And once we're activated and do have indeed a threat of a storm, we have hours of every day at 9 o'clock a.m., 1 o'clock p.m., and 6:30 p.m. we will have broadcasts on those radio stations for particularly pertaining to Martin County information.
All right, excellent. I think the next question would be, and I think sometimes this can become confusing, what exactly is a hurricane watch and what is a hurricane warning?
Okay, a hurricane watch means that a hurricane may threaten an area and make landfall within the next 48 hours.
Okay. 48 hours.
Yes. And a hurricane warning means that a hurricane is expected to make landfall. So it steps up. It's expected to make landfall within the next 36 hours.
Does that mean in our area then?
Yes.
This is the difference.
Yes. Once we go under, if Martin County falls under that warning, which you can get all that information, off the television, the radio, it will be certainly made available.
Now let's assume that they did have the warning. In other words, this is the last one saying it's probably going to come into our area, a good probability. What's the first decisions what we should make?
Well, before we ever go under a warning, by the time we go under a warning, people's decisions really, they need to have already determined what they will do when that happens. So whether or not they need to now decide and plan and think about whether or not they're going to evacuate, whether they're going to stay home, whether or not, and how they decide that is whether or not they're in an evacuation zone, whether they live in a manufactured home, whether they live in close proximity to the water, and they need to make that decision really and know what they plan to do long before we go under a warning.
So you're actually saying that we should do this when you actually just as the watch. In other words, this is even though it might not hit exactly in our area, but there might be a chance that it would.
Yes.
And this is where you'd prepare all these.
Oh yes, and you want to do it well in advance. Hurricanes can be unpredictable. They can turn, and so you don't want to wait again at the last minute to make those decisions. The number one decision is: can I stay home, or do I need to evacuate?
Okay. Now I've got down here, what are the 4 plans of action if a hurricane threatens? And I would assume that could either be a watch or a warning. And on there I've got here Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D.
Right. Right.
Sorry I did that to you. But
That's all right. That's all right. Plan A would be that you plan to relocate outside the area. In other words, you plan to get in your car or get in the car with a friend, and you plan to leave Martin County. That would be, and that's solely your decision whether you plan to leave or not, because you have other options. But if you do plan to leave the area, you need to plan to leave early. You need to go ahead and do that while we're under that watch.
Well, what should you use as a criteria to establish that you're going to do that? Is there in other words, why am I going to go? What are the reasons?
Well, for some people, it's fear. But if you live, again, in an evacuation zone, if you're in an area where we're going to order you to evacuate, you're going to either have to leave the area, go to a local shelter, stay with family or friends, or if you can stay home, you stay home. That's the 4 plans. That's
So your second plan, the B plan, what is that? Is that just staying home?
That's staying with family or friends. You live on the barrier island, you're in one of our evacuation zones, or you're in a manufactured home, which we order to evacuate due to the wind. So, and that's really an ideal option. If you can stay with family or friends because you have to evacuate your home, then you don't have to endure that drive and try to get out of the area.
Right.
You stay with family or friends who do have a home that's not in an evacuation area and a home that's safe,
Well, you probably wouldn't have to take as much stuff with you.
No, you wouldn't
either.
have to take as
So
much.
it's just going from one house to another house, really.
Correct, correct.
Well, on your, the C plan is staying home,
Right.
which a lot of people tend to want to do.
Right.
What's
And
the criteria for that?
Yeah, for many, they can stay home, again, as long as they're not in a manufactured home, they're not in an ordered evacuation zone, as long as their home is structurally sound, they have a good roof, it's built to updated codes, they have shutters and a reinforced garage door, they're not prone to flooding, they can stay home. In that case, you know, they can make that decision.
Well, you know, this question really isn't on my list here, but I have often wondered, can somebody actually make you evacuate? If this is your home, your dwelling, and you own it, and you have, you know, I mean,
That's a good question, Fred.
Bad one.
No, because actually we are not, and law enforcement is not going to come haul you out of your house. If you make the decision to stay home, and we have that happen, they may come to your door and ask you for a contact information for someone to call, but they're not going to physically.
They're not going to haul you out.
They're not going to haul you out of your house. We order you to evacuate. Strongly recommend you heed that order. But no, I mean, you do
Well,
get
you know,
people who stay
I've heard
home.
in the past that if you don't evacuate when you've been told to, that they really, maybe they might not have the chance to come in and help you if you have a problem.
Well, that is the problem, and that's what we tell people, you know, and that's what law enforcement will tell you if they come to your door. If you choose to stay home, once those winds get sustained 39 miles an hour, help's not coming.
Oh, 39?
39 miles per hour, which is a sustained tropical storm force wind.
Right.
It's too dangerous for us to send fire rescue, first responders, law enforcement on the road. So you're now stuck. Okay. If you've made that decision. And then after, if you're in an area where you should have evacuated and you did not, after the storm, there may be a delay in when help can get to you. You may be stranded, the area all around you flooded.
Right.
So that's a chance you're going to take if you don't evacuate and you're told to do so.
So you're recommending if they tell you to evacuate, leave?
Yes.
All right. Now the next one is let's assume that you are going to evacuate, but you're going to go to a shelter.
Right.
What is the criteria there? And is this the best possible scenario?
Well, we have a wonderful Red Cross, and they're going to open several shelters in Martin County in the schools. And if folks opt to go to a shelter, certainly, and they don't have any other alternative, that's a good option. But I just like to remind folks, if you can go to family and friends and you have another option, you want to do so. Shelters are crowded.
Sure.
You're going to share the bathroom with hundreds of people. You're not going to have a bed to sleep in. You're going to sleep on the floor in a cot. So it's not the best option. But the Red Cross is there and to oversee it. So if that's what you opt to do, certainly we would rather you go to that shelter by all means than stay in an unsafe location.
But is this a last resort then, would you think?
It sort of is, yes.
Yeah.
Sort of
so
is.
if you can find a different place to evacuate to, you're
Right.
better off.
That's why we're out here like today, and appreciate you having us on, to remind people, make your plans now. Decide what you're going to do now so that you don't have to make a last resort decision. Oh, I got to go to a shelter because I didn't plan to do anything else.
Well, you know, this brings up another thing too. When you're leaving your home and you're going to a shelter, what are some of the provisions that you really have to have when you're going? Maybe the other way is, what provisions are the shelters going to have? Both ways.
They will have food and water and snacks at the shelter, but if you have special dietary needs, you need to take your special diet foods. If you're on medications, you need to make sure you take your medications with you. Which, just another point on the medications, once we go under and the governor issues a state of emergency, an executive order for the state of Florida, you can refill your medication for another 30 days if you have a refill on that prescription, you can go ahead, which normally you can't do, but you can go ahead and get another refill so you have plenty of medications. The law enables you to do that. So take your medications. And your toiletries, your bedding, your pillow, and a blanket.
Well, they supply the bed, but you take the stuff to put on
Well,
it.
they don't supply a bed.
Oh, they do not.
They will have cots, but will everybody get a cot? It depends on how many people are there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, how can you find out where these shelters are located?
Well, we have multiple places you can find out. If you go to our website at www.martin.fl.us, and right on the menu on the left side, you see emergency information. You can go in there and find the list of all of the shelters in Martin County, where they're located, which one's the closest one to your home.
Okay.
But you need to pay attention to, again, your TV and radio, local radio, and MCTV will be airing it, which shelters are opening and at what time.
So they don't all open at the same
No,
time?
they do not. They stage them open one at a time. And depending on the storm, the severity of the storm, we have actually 8 primary shelters for Martin County. But if the storm, say, is a Category 1, we won't open all 8 of those shelters.
Okay.
So you want to pay attention to, we'll be putting that out through our information, which shelters are open.
Now, I just thought of this. Again, it's not on your list, but when would you go to the shelters? Is there a point, say, of wind velocity, or in other words, how do you make the decision? You've made the decision you're going to go to a shelter. When do you decide you're actually going to go?
Well, you're going to want to go before we get those tropical storm force winds.
Okay, that's
So, which is that 39. Now, someone may not know whether the winds are there. Other than that's being broadcast as well.
Probably they tell you that.
We will always open the shelters prior to the wind getting to that point.
All right, what about special needs? Do they have special shelters for special needs?
We do. We have what we call the Special Needs Shelter. It's really a medical shelter. It's located at Anderson Middle School when it's opened, and it's really for people who have a medical need, a minor medical need, needs some oversight maybe. They bring their caregiver with them. Most of it is folks who are oxygen dependent, electric dependent, and need to be somewhere where they can get their oxygen and some of their medical needs overseen. Our health department runs that shelter for us. Another component of the special needs program that we have, which you can read all about on our website, is if anyone needs transportation to a shelter, any shelter, they can contact us and we will pick them up and get them to the shelter.
Excellent. Now, what about, particularly some of the older people, they might even be in special need category, that have pets. And of course, they become almost dependent on them.
Yes.
What do you do about that situation?
Well, we do not have a pet-friendly shelter at this time in Martin County, but we do have an agreement with the Humane Society. So that if someone needs to evacuate and they're going to go to a shelter, which the shelters will not take your pets with you, they can leave their pet at the Humane Society, and the Humane Society will take care of their pet for them at no charge.
Well, now, is this done beforehand? In other words, do you have to make arrangements?
Yes,
You
yes.
have to do that before?
Great question, yes. Yeah, you want to, ideally we want you to pre-register, don't just show up at the Humane Society. So again, if you know you're going to evacuate, you know you're going to decide that early now, go ahead and call the Humane Society, make those arrangements now.
Okay. Last question.
Last question.
Right. What is Code Red? I've been fascinated by that, looking at it. Code Red.
Code Red. Well, Code Red is an emergency notification system that we have just launched recently, very recently, and it enables us to put alerts out to our citizens, whether it's an alert, a notification that we're evacuating an area, might be due to a wildfire, might be due to a hazardous materials incident, whatever it might be, we're able to choose an area in the county, or can, if it involves the entire county, alert the entire county through this notification system. And what we're asking folks to do now is go on our website, and you can opt in, sign up, and register your telephone numbers, your cell phone numbers, and if your landline phone numbers, like through is a voice over IP or type where it's not through the regular phone system. You want to go ahead and enter all your phone numbers in there to make sure you're going to get our alerts. What's really, really neat about this new system we have, you can decide whether you want those alerts by text, by email, or by voice. And you can make that option. You can also choose within there that you want to get weather alerts through our system from the National Weather Service. So we're really excited about it. Just launched this. So everybody go on there and sign up. Get your cell phone numbers in there so we make sure that you get our alerts.
Boy, that's pretty neat.
It is
In other words,
neat.
on a cell phone, it'll say alert, alert, alert.
It will. And you'll know then if there's something going on in your neighborhood,
Right.
whether your neighborhood is under a tornado warning or we are evacuating your neighborhood for some reason. Yes.
That's excellent. So it's already in place and
It's
already
in
up
place.
and working right now.
It's up and working. You can go to our website again and sign up. And there's multiple ways you can get to it on the website under Hot Topics or I want to sign up for. Or if you don't have a computer, you can call us at 772-287-1652 and we will sign you up.
All right, excellent. All right, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
All right, Yvette,
Oh,
you're up
okay.
now. All right, and you're going to talk about tree care, food, water, farms, all of this stuff.
Okay.
First off, what is a beneficial pre-hurricane cultural practice to reduce tree damage? Whew, that's a long one.
Well, there are several things you can do in advance of the hurricanes. The first is just when you're planning your landscape, as always, we talk a lot in the Extension Service and about the right plant in the right place. You know, if a tree is in a good spot, it's going to be healthier and better able to make it through the hurricane conditions. So, you know, look at your site, look at the, you know, the area you're in general, South Florida, and whether you have a small yard or a large yard, and then choose the tree you would plant there based on that. So that's right plant, right place. And then when you choose your tree, you also want one that's going to be structurally sound. So you want to ask for a Florida #1 or a Florida Fancy grade of tree, and those are going to be trees that are already being shaped and trained so that they're structurally sound from the get-go.
Even before you plant it, you can tell, right?
Right. Yes, they're going to have that dominant leader, they call it, that, you know, one main trunk. So that, and then you know, also look for planting trees in groups. That's something that the University of Florida researchers have found, is that it's actually better, you know, if you have a small area, okay, maybe plant a small tree or different layers of shrubs, but take your large areas and instead of planting one large stature tree, consider planting a grouping of 3 to 5 trees. And then that way they actually kind of support one another, buffer.
Right, diminish the wind load.
Right, and then their canopies don't develop as wide, they're more narrow, so they're less top heavy than if they were planted individually. And pruning, that's the last thing,
Right.
proper pruning.
Well, as you're looking through your yard, let's say prior to, you've got a warning, or maybe it's before or after, how can you evaluate, or should you evaluate, the trees that you already have existing? And what would you look for there?
You look at the overall structure of the tree. You want your trees to have a good main central leader. So you want to make sure that the other branches of the trunk are less than half the diameter of the trunk. So if you have, you know, a 24-inch trunk, you don't want a 24-inch branch over here, because that's going to be a potential to break off and damage the tree. So you want to look at that, the structure of the tree. You want to look at, you know, what's happening in the root zone. Have I had any recent root pruning, any digging in the root area? Is the root area kind of confined within curbing? Do I look at the health of the tree? Do I see any root rot or any evidence of decay in the tree? And some of this might not be evident, you know, to a normal person just going to look at it. So we recommend when you're looking at, a health assessment of a tree or a pruning of a tree that you reach out to a certified arborist, and you can find those through the International Society of Arborists. You can actually find arborists in your area as well.
Well, many times I've looked at areas where they might have got a huge oak tree with a potential root area of maybe 40 or 50 feet. They've got it planted in a little tiny thing like that. And you know that, the wind's going to probably blow it over. So this is probably what you're talking about.
Right.
Things that you can just assess with up here a little bit, you might have a problem if you have high wind.
Right.
Now this one right here is one that I see, probably even coming here to give this, I saw some of what they call the hurricane cut, particularly on sable palms and so on. Tell us a little bit about that and why we should or shouldn't do it.
Okay, the hurricane cut, I'm sure most people are familiar with it, but it's basically where most of the fronds of a palm are cut off. So you're just left with a small area of fronds. And that is not a good practice, and the reason why it isn't a good practice is that all of the fronds on the palm, well, first of all, palms they're adapted to windy conditions, and those fronds are there. They serve a lot of functions, one being protecting the bud. The growing part of the palm is kind of protected by all these fronds that surround it. And then also the fronds, even those that have started to maybe turn yellow, discolor, turn a little bit brown, they're still providing nutrients to the palm. So when you remove them, you're taking nutrition away from the palm and actually doing it a disservice.
So actually you can do more harm than good.
Right.
Yeah.
The only thing that's recommended that you prune on palms before a hurricane is you can trim off seeds, coconuts, things like that that would be.
That actually could come.
Right.
I've always been amazed that people think that these are going to come off and become the fronds, become missiles in a wind.
Right.
And I recall every time I've ever tried to pull off a frond, I could almost swing like Tarzan on it. So, it's unlikely that would happen. All right. In regard to trees, what is the first step that you would take after the storm? Let's say you had a pretty heavy storm and you might have had a little bit of damage. How do you assess that and what do you do?
Yes, the first step I was going to say is to assess it and make sure that you look at it carefully before you act. And then once you've made an assessment, you've seen where you're at, you're going to want to look at first cleaning up the tree. So if there are any broken branches, or if a branch completely broke off and it left kind of a jagged end tip to the branch, then you're going to want to make a clean cut there. And all of these cuts that you're making, you want to make sure that you're not making the cuts flush with the trunk of the tree. And if this is the trunk, you don't want to make the cut flush there. You want to preserve what's called the branch bark collar, which is a kind of a swollen area of tissue at where the branch joins the trunk, because that area, the tissues there contain hormones and chemicals that will help the plant heal from that wound.
Well, that brings up then, at what point do you think a professional should be brought in?
The guidance from the university is that if you're going to start working above ground level, in other words, if you're going to start bringing in maybe a ladder and some ropes to work above your head, get off the ground with us, that you bring in a professional. And if you're dealing with a tree or a branch or limb in a really open area, then you can bring in what's called a tree care professional, not necessarily a certified arborist, but whoever you bring in, you want to make sure that they have insurance, because otherwise you could be liable for any injury that occurs. And so you want to make sure they have that, and if they're a professional, they're going to have the equipment they need, that insurance, like I said, and the training. And in the case of an arborist, that's who you're going to call when you get into, you're going to need someone to climb the tree to make a cut, or you're going to need someone to fell a tree that's near a structure, or make a structural pruning cuts. So that's where the advanced training of a certified arborist can really help.
You brought up, and I saw this after some hurricanes that we've had in the past, particularly some of the ones that were really, really damaging to trees. And then even in our neighborhood, people were coming in and just going house to house offering their services. Right. And you don't know whether they know what the heck they're doing or not. So what you're saying is that you should, number one, make sure they have insurance.
Right.
Maybe that they have good-looking equipment, and possibly if you can get some sort of a recommendation
Yes.
from somebody. I think that's very, very good advice, because I definitely saw some things done that shouldn't have, but just by people that were happy that somebody was there to take care of it.
Right.
What are some of the post-hurricane practices that would be beneficial?
Clean up the area. You want to assess, some of the things that could have happened during the hurricane. Could have been, debris, wind damage, obviously.
All right, what about, now we're going to get off the trees a little bit, what about your pools? How do you take care of that?
Pools, well, with those, you definitely do not want to empty them of water. You can lower the water level a little bit if you want to, but you don't even have to do that. You do want to make sure you turn off all power to the pool, and you want to take the pool pump filter and either remove the motor, or that's not likely. You can wrap the motor, or, just to protect it so it's not going to get flooded. It's not going to get, or as best you can, protect it from flooding and debris. And then, and then remove all loose items from the patio.
Sure,
but don't put it in your pool. Don't put your furniture in your pool.
My practices have always been to throw it in the pool.
Right.
Superchlorinate, throw it in the pool.
Right.
No, okay, so you suggest not to.
Right. The reason that it's this from the university that I'm reading, finding this information, and the reason they suggest not to is that number one, if it's heavy furniture, it can actually damage your pool's the surface of the pool, and the pool chemicals themselves can damage the pool furniture. So you can put it in there if you absolutely have to, but just remove it right away afterwards.
I'll take your suggestion next time. All right, we're going to switch a little bit too, do it very quickly. What about your food and water supplies?
Okay, Deb talked about that a bit and mentioned the amount of water to take with you. As far as food, you want to look at, first, like she said, gathering your non-perishable food supplies, and then look within your house. Look at your refrigerator. Do you have any food in there that's already gone bad? If so, go ahead and get that out. Make sure you have a thermometer in your refrigerator, because that's going to tell you if your temperatures have gone too low for too long. It'll give you some clue of that. Your freezer, you can stock it up with bottles of water so that those freeze and then help to kind of keep the freezer cold. And then, during the hurricane, when power goes out, start eating first. Start eating from your fridge, because that's going to be the quickest to become unusable, and then your freezer, and then you have those non-perishable food items last.
I remember after the hurricanes that we became very adept at using our grill for all sorts of, even cooking turkeys.
I've used my camp stove inside, which you should not do. Don't ever use any of those things inside.
But you did it. All right.
I did.
All right, next I think we'll talk about, because you're commercial, so you're also talking about the outlanding areas like farms. What you should do to prepare for your farms and your buildings and stuff, very quickly.
Okay, basically, as a farmer, you might want to, of course, like everyone, kind of assess where you're at. Look at what am I going to need after this hurricane to clean up, and looking at, to prepare the soil for replanting, as far as propagating any new plants. What kind of equipment am I going to need to clean up, and make sure you have a plan of, if you don't have that equipment, where are you going to find it? So those are the kind of things.
And of course, I think while we're on that, almost everybody that's out in the rural areas, they've got all sorts of animals. Well, how do you prepare and take care of that?
Well, with animals, if they're enclosed, you want to make sure they have plenty of ventilation. So open doors, open windows, open ventilation ducts. Livestock are actually better out of doors. So let them outside, check your fencing, make sure they have access to different areas so that they can, for example, get to low-lying areas when there are high winds, and get to higher ground areas if floodwaters are an issue. But again, make sure they have plenty of food and water.
Just let them go out and take care of themselves, more or less.
Yes, in your fenced-in pastures, yes.
All right, what are some of the concerns for farms as far as cleanup after the storm? And the reason I'm bringing that up, because we worry a lot about stormwater runoff, and you've got animals and all sorts of stuff like that.
Right, yeah, so you're dealing with, you may have floodwaters that may have gotten the animals' food wet, and you don't want to feed them wet food, so you can, take the hay outside and spread it out to dry. You can start drying out your buildings before you start making your repairs to them. Water, make sure you keep an adequate supply of water for the animals.
So actually, you've got a little bit more to worry about than the average person that's just worried about their home.
For certain.
Because you've got your animals to take care of also.
Right.
Well, you have a pretty wide and diverse area here. Is there anything that I've forgotten?
No, I guess the only thing I would say is just on the tree pruning, just encourage people to really find a qualified person when they're looking at tree pruning, whether it's around the time of hurricanes or not, and avoid, we see a lot of topping or hat racking of trees where you make a bunch of cuts of major branches so that you take away a lot of the canopy. You want to avoid that and avoid some of the other practices like lion tailing, they call it, where you leave bare branches with just foliage at the tips of the branches. All of those practices like those and others are going to make the tree less healthy, less structurally sound.
Well, I think what people forget is that these trees, and if they come structurally bad, can become very, very dangerous.
Right.
Because they have a lot of weight to them, and they can really be, not only can they hurt people, but they can just ruin houses too. So it's very, very important that they assess before they even get into the storm. All right, well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You did very well. All right, Nick, we're up to you, boy.
I'm glad I'm last.
What do FP&L's pre-storm preparations, when do they actually start?
I don't know if they've got a starting date. It's almost like a circle. You're always planning. It's become a year-round training period, but certainly right before the hurricane season, it intensifies. We have a lot of pre-storm season training, dry runs, drills that we participate in with Debbie and the emergency management group here in Martin County.
So actually what you're saying is you do this year-round?
Year-round. It's become a year-round job.
Yeah. What are some of the major upgrades that FP&L is making now and has done in the recent past?
Well, since 04 and 05, and we learned a lot during those hurricanes, and so we've done a lot to our infrastructure since then, and we've got over 1 million poles in our system. That's a lot. I think about 1.1 million poles, and we've just finished up an inspection program over the last several years to actually inspect each one of those, and if they need to be replaced or repaired, we've done that. But some of the major upgrades have been on our main lines that serve what we would call critical facilities, like hospitals and 911 centers and EOCs and communications facilities. So we've upgraded those major lines, we call them feeders, to those facilities so that they will withstand much higher winds.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the advanced technologies that you have invested in the recent past and are doing so even now?
We've got a number of pieces of equipment that's been installed in the last few years. Of course, we've gone to a smart meter technology, which gives us an indication when customers are out of power quicker. We don't have to wait on a phone call from a customer to tell us they're out of power. We know that. We've got pieces of equipment out on both the transmission line, our high voltage system, and our distribution lines in the substations that help identify problems, give us a heads up, even in a predictive mode to let us know when there's going to be a problem on a type of system, and we can do some automatic switching remotely to lessen that time that people are out of power.
So this is like in my neighborhood, they came through and put the new meters on. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Have you had those installed in all of Martin County?
Pretty much in our whole system. We're wrapping up. We've got about 4.5 million customers. Most of them now have the smart meters.
What is your comprehensive storm plan? And I know you've got one. I don't know how you're going to.
Well, you know, there are three things we focus on in our comprehensive plan. That's, you know, comprehensive is a good word because it's got so many components to it, but we concentrate on readiness, being ready, and restoration, and then when the storm's over, on recovery, because we're part of the community and we're wanting to do things to bring a community back up to normalcy as quickly as possible. But embedded in all of that, for instance, into readiness, I've already talked about training. We spend a lot of time in training. We set up agreements. We have agreements, mutual assistance agreements with other utilities throughout the country. In fact, you may recall, following the hurricanes of '04, we had contractors and other utilities into Martin County from, I think at the peak we had 30 states represented in Canada, just in South Florida. Yeah. So we have those agreements all in place ahead of time. We work closely with the local emergency management group before hurricane season to make sure we've prioritized those critical structures, critical facilities that helps us prioritize the restoration.
I can remember after one of the hurricanes, we had to leave the area and go north, and on the turnpike, I don't know whether it was a turnpike or whether it was I-95, and we went by this line of trucks that was coming south. I thought it never ended. Yeah. You know, I couldn't believe how many of these electrical trucks were coming down. I think that's pretty neat. Where does FP&L get their weather information? I think you get it from a special source.
Well, we do. First of all, we have our own meteorologist on staff. We've had a meteorologist for a long time. Very helpful. He's there year-round. It's not just during hurricane season, because this time of year we're starting just a windy season, rainy season, and a lot of winds, and so he's even helping us with that. But there's a service out of Omaha, Nebraska that we use, and it's used by a lot of utilities. It's used by a lot of aviation companies, so we get our information from them.
So it's a little bit different, and it's more concise toward your needs.
More structured for what we need, yes.
Right. What are the main efforts after a storm?
Well, the main efforts, of course, are restoration. You know, if you summed up, I guess, a good principle of what we try to do following a storm is to restore power to as many customers as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. I mean, that just sums up what I think probably what our restoration mission would be.
What high-tech tools do you use for faster restoration of power?
Some of the advanced technology tools now to monitor the status of our transmission system, our substations. We have equipment now that's used not only in the offices, but our restoration trucks have equipment in their trucks that help, where they can use screens, as many companies do now, computers, to look to identify where the problems are, help them identify where the nearest crews are that can come help them, and so we use a lot of the latest and the greatest, and greatest. You know, there's one system that we use. It's called spatial vision, and it's someone described it as GPS on steroids. It's a Google Earth-based system.
Now I got a loaded question for you here. When can the public expect time of restoration?
Yeah, you know, I will say even after Hurricane Francis and Jean, we learned a lot during those hurricanes, and we made a lot of mistakes, and we made changes to our process following those hurricanes. And one thing that the public made very loud and clear is that when they called in to find out when they were going to have power, they wanted to know. They didn't want just a general answer for the whole system. So we've made a commitment within 24 hours after landfall to have an idea based on the damage through a modeling system, and we know how many hours of crews, man hours it's going to take to restore. We can have a pretty good idea what the restoration time is going to be for the whole system. And then within 48 hours, we'll get that narrowed down to a county level. And then within 96 hours, we'll break it down more into a local level. Maybe a section of Martin County, we'd be able to say, well, in Rio, here's the date we think all of Rio will have service.
Yeah, very good. How do you get information on outages? And I think you've already answered a little bit of that. I think probably the way it should be stated is, should people, when they have an outage, should they call? Or do you think you guys already know?
No, we don't encourage them to call. We pretty much know people are out of power, but how would they get information? They've mentioned about some of the briefings that are held daily, multiple times during the day. We participate in those briefings, and so they're able to relay that, and you're able to pick that information up on local TV and radio stations. But you also can go to our website, www.fpl.com, and see updates about storm restoration.
Yeah. This is one that I think is really important. I have a little portable generator, and I think that possibly in the last storm I did some things wrong. But what are some of the tips you can give us on using portable generators?
That's probably one of the biggest fears we have from a safety standpoint is customers not using a generator properly. They need to follow the manufacturer's directions on the generator. And all of them should have directions about not using it indoors. I mean, you tell people that, but they will run a generator in a garage where fumes can come into the house, and it's very dangerous. Or a fire could get started, so they need to use a generator well away from the house. They need to plug their appliances directly into the generator. Don't try to hook their generator into their main panel, because you'll get backfeed and it eventually ends up on the FPL's lines, and it becomes a danger to those workers. And so those are the main key elements of using a generator safely.
When you brought something up, putting it into the panel, my question would be, should that panel be turned off during, let's say the power goes off, should you go in and
Well, if you're going to be gone, if you're going to be leaving your house, evacuating, I would suggest you turn your appliances off and possibly even turn the main breaker off to your house.
All right. Well, that brings up the next question. Let's say that the power was about to come back on. Do you just put the breaker on, or do you take it individually?
Well, you do it individually. It would be the best way. And you also, when you're typically a panel is in a garage or somewhere where it could be susceptible to water getting in a garage, so you certainly don't want to stand on in water when you turn your breakers back on. So you need to be standing on some dry wood or something dry that when you turn those breakers on. And it's even a good idea, rather than just use your hand to turn those breakers on following a storm, use some kind of wood.
Oh, really?
Use the wood end of a hammer or something and turn the breakers on. It's just a good, safe practice.
Right. Now, just to end this whole thing out here, I've got a couple restoration frequently asked questions for you. One of them you've pretty well already answered. Does FP&L know when my power is out? And I think you told us
Yeah,
yes.
and we certainly know the main areas, the main feeders that go into an area. We know which ones are out, and helps us prioritize our restoration.
Next one is, why do FP&L crews leave my neighborhood when I still don't have power?
Maybe it's lunchtime. I don't know. There could be a number of reasons why they would leave. There may be an emergency somewhere else that they've called them off on. There may be something there that they just can't do anything else with. We have instances where homes are, their own service is damaged. The weatherhead coming out of the top of their house is damaged, so we can't restore it, so they're going to have to get an electrician to do that. So, yeah, there are, or they may be able to leave and go get 1,000 customers on over here rather than spend 2 hours over here to get one customer on. So there's a number of reasons they could leave.
This is a good one I know you're going to appreciate. Why does my neighbor have power and I don't? I think you've pretty well answered that already.
Well, every situation is different. He may be on a different transformer than you. You may have some specific problems on your own service. So.
Yeah. And I think the last one, of course, I'm not sure how this would be presented, but what is FP&L's policy on tree debris removal after a storm? And I think perhaps they're worried about the stuff that's in your areas rather than on the individual properties.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get as many people back on as quickly as possible. So if we have to do some trimming of trees to get someone's service back on, we typically are going to leave that debris there. And then it's going to be up to the homeowner or the local governmental agency at some time following the storm to pick that up at curbside but
Sure.
we've got to move on. If we stopped and tried to remove, haul off everything, it's just going to slow up the restoration.
Right. Well, I think that's all of the questions that I've come up with, and I think you all did extremely well. Any passing or lasting remarks from any of you that we can use for the show?
No, we keep talking about how long it's been since we've had a major hurricane, and our customers may just don't take it as seriously as they should. I think that's a serious issue for all of us. And we somehow, and I appreciate you doing the show today, because I think we need to get out front of the people again, let them know that they need to be ready.
Well, I even find myself the same way. I've got a little generator, and every year I fix. This year I didn't even bother with it. So you're right. These are things that you have to do, and it's like Yvette said. You even need to go around and make sure that your yard and your trees are safe. So these are things that we can do right now. You brought up some good points on that too.
Well, and often, they forecast, they predict the season every year. This year they have predicted a less than average season for the number of storms. But the thing of it is, it only takes one.
Only takes one. That's exactly right.
And so even though it might be a quiet season and not very many storms, if that one storm, we have to be ready for that one storm when it decides to come our way. So, yeah.
You might, before we really leave, and we're going to put this up on the video. Give us some places that they can go to. Do you have websites or numbers? Or we'll start with you.
We do. If anyone wants to call, 772-287-1652 is the phone number for emergency management. And on the website again, www.martin.fl.us. And there's multiple ways you can get to our information. We are in the Fire Rescue Department, so you can go to the Fire Rescue Department, or on the left side of that menu on the county's webpage, Emergency Information. It'll take you to the site. There's a little icon for hurricanes or all the other hazards that we're vulnerable to get our information.
Yvette, how about you?
Well, through the University of Florida, there are a number of great resources on a wide range of topics. A good way to access those is to go to solutionsforyourlife.com and use the search box, and there are, like I said, it covers a whole disaster handbook is available online covering all these, and hurricanes are just one chapter of it, believe it or not. And another resource, you can come to our office. We're located out at the Martin County Fairgrounds. Fred and I are both there, and you can call our main line at 772-288-5654. You can come in and speak to us. We have Master Gardener volunteers to work with homeowners. We have other staff to work with commercial and other folks, so we're out there.
Nick?
And again, www.fpl.com/storm, and get a lot of information. I know we were limited on time today, but there's information on there about particularly on safety, and that's what we want to emphasize.
Well, I had an opportunity to look at all of these websites in preparation for this, and I was astounded at the amount of material that's up there. I mean, really, there's no reason that anybody or any resident should have any questions on what to do. I mean, it's really there. So I encourage all of you that are watching this, check into some of these things, and if you have questions, get a hold of some of these people and their websites. I really encourage you to do that, and we'll all weather the storm. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
See you later.